What's up, everybody? Ask Me Anything time for, what is it, January 4th, 2024. So, of course, as always, I've got the questions from the private Facebook group pulled up, and I've got all the questions pulled up from the, what am I trying to say, the Beyond the Whiteboard Linchpin squad as well. So we've got a lot of stuff here. Okay. There's a ton of questions. So I'm going to try to move at a good clip so this doesn't take 90 minutes. A lot of great questions. So thanks to all of you. These are your questions. And this is always so fun. It's awesome answering everybody's questions. People are smart. All right, let's see. So I'm just going to run it down in order here. All right, let me open a couple more tabs here. Okay. All right, here we go. Dive right in. Got my hot pink Lift Heavy Run Fast cup that my son put stickers all over. He kind of took possession of this cup. Here we go. Number 1 from Phil T. So you got cleared to work out and you had the video update after your first workout back. Congratulations. Thank you, Phil. Appreciate it. Curious what kind of differences in your mobility and movement you've seen already, i.e., is there a difference yet in things like squats or even putting on your shoes? How does movement generally feel compared to pre-surgery? So I'll tell you what, so for anybody who's unfamiliar with it, I had a total hip replacement, anterior procedure done on about 7 weeks ago. And so, yeah, that was quite something. Nothing from working out. It's from an accident that I had in the military a long time ago, like 23 years ago, where I broke my pelvis. And so this was just going to happen. So the time was right. To get to your question, Phil, the differences that I've seen so far are amazing, like life-changing, ridiculous, amazing. The simplest thing that I'll give you is, well, first of all, yes, I can finally put my sock and my shoe in my right foot, which I haven't been able to do pain-free for years. That's amazing. But then if I was to go out to the garage and start to get warm for like a below parallel day, man, to get warmed up to squat would take me like 30 minutes of just annoying misery. And then I'm going to take a fisherman's friend here. And then once I finally got warm, it still was painful. It would be like below parallel, painful. Right around parallel, I had this wicked bone spur. It would pinch, and it was what it was. Now I've got the bone spurs removed and I can walk out into the garage and with no 30-minute warm-up, squat number 1 is to parallel. Squat number 1, which I'm sure a lot of people that haven't needed to have the hip replacement, they're like, yeah, that sounds kind of normal. But I haven't lived that life in like a decade. So it's astonishing. It's incredible. So yeah. Matthew G. See, I forgot to expand this. Let's say a modestly fit 50-year-old wanted to set a goal of qualifying for the games in a Masters/Legends age group, maybe 60 to 64, to set a 10-year time frame. What would that person need to do fitness-wise other than have good nutrition and diligently follow Linchpin programming? There's so many factors there. So here's what I'll say. We have most certainly seen people follow just the Linchpin protocol and qualify to move on in competitions, post the Open and stuff like that. So I think, is it possible for you to qualify? Yes. But that's a different thing than prepare to actually go to the games. You could probably qualify with less overall volume, less of everything, but then going to the games and dealing with the increased amount of volume that you're going to do on a daily basis, that would be a different level of preparation. So to answer your question, do I think you could qualify? Yes, I think it's possible. People have done things like that before. But then if you were actually going to go to the games, you would want to add volume and things to your training. But you're on the right track with nail down the workouts, good nutrition, get enough sleep. Sean T. With reference to Tuesday's wildcard option, which had bench press, shoulder press, and push press heavy day, where did the 7 reps of the bench press come from? Is it based off the prescribed push press numbers or something else? That is the workout I completed and I loved it. I'm glad you loved it. A lot of people loved that one. I'm just wondering, thanks for everything you do with Linchpin. The fitness and the culture you cultivate is unmatched and immensely appreciated. I'm a dad, a husband, first responder, cop, and I've never followed programming that complements my life better. Very cool. So for the bench press, first of all, if you want to make everybody happy, give them some bench press. But the 7, I didn't want to go ones on the bench press, especially if we don't bench press regularly. Having everybody try to go for heavy singles, not the smartest thing in the world. But I wanted to find a rep range that was basically, I wanted heavier than a low volume kind of sets of 5 sort of thing, but I didn't want it to be a higher volume set on the bench press. I wanted it to be that nice kind of middle ground, which is an area of variance we don't touch regularly. So I think it was a really beautiful rep scheme. So the 7s worked really well for the bench press there, and I'm glad that you liked it. People really enjoyed that one. Just almost swallowed my fisherman's friend wrong. In a recent VNR podcast, Very Not Random podcast, this question is from Chris R. You described an interval workout with ring muscle-ups, thrusters, and the air bike. Is that little treat still in the cards for an upcoming workout, or did it morph into the bar muscle-up, lunge, row workout from Saturday? Chris, that one is still pending. It is looming in your future. You just don't know the date yet, but it's set, it's programmed, it's coming, and I hope that you enjoy it. Pauline B. Can we talk about goals? What's good/healthy with setting a goal for weight loss and or body fat percentage, especially for obese athletes that need to lose weight, so the number/data is important and not vain? I'm going to point you to a nutrition guru, which is E.C. Sinkowski from Optimize Me Nutrition. So check out Optimize Me Nutrition, both on the web and on Instagram. And her podcast is called The Consistency Project. And I know for a fact, because I heard the episode, it was a while ago, it might have been like a year ago, she had on a guest, and on the show they were specifically talking about setting the nutrition goals for obese athletes. And I'm going to mess it up, so please don't quote me on this. But it was something like, if somebody who's not obese has been eating poorly, looking to get their nutrition back on track, and they were talking on this part like specifically about protein, eventually like a 1 gram per body weight was probably not necessary for most people, but getting to around like 0.7 per pound of body weight was a good like goal to get to. But for obese athletes, I think it was like getting to like 0.5 or starting at 0.5. But long story short, they had a great discussion specifically on this topic. So check out Optimize Me Nutrition on the web and on Instagram. Check out her podcast, The Consistency Project, and do a little Google research there and find the one specifically that was about obese athletes. And if you can't find it, you could just probably like send her a comment or a direct message on Instagram and ask her about that. But that's the resource that I would point you towards. Let's see. Jeff Roundtree, listening to your programming steps in the various episodes and yesterday's Very Not Random, have you ever considered automating the process with some sort of code or program? Imagining it could give you some form of heavy days and the functional movements for the other days. I haven't read the ebook yet, but having heard you talk about it, it seems like the process is a good candidate for some sort of coding with all the steps and rules that you have in place. As with all things automated and AI, it would still need to be tuned and oversight would be required. Just a fun thought. It is an interesting thought, and AI is fascinating, and AI learns from basically, while it doesn't have its own intelligence yet, right? It takes over the world like Terminator, but it learns from just scraping what's already out on the internet and compiling and seeing what's the average or whatever it happens to be. The interesting thing about what we do is I think AI would probably do a really good job of building something similar and very simple, quite frankly, like a linear strength progression. It would probably crush that sort of stuff because it's very formatted, very formulaic and not overly complicated. And there's so much stuff on the internet about that. The world of actually like programming for fitness is an interesting one, because there's not a lot of books or anything out there written or data about how to program mixed modality strength and conditioning sessions in which you want to be good at gymnastics and engine work and weightlifting, Olympic lifting and powerlifting, short, medium, and long, and how do you work in not for time days versus for time days, and modulating your intensity and strict work, and like, it's a fascinating deal. I'm sure it will be there one day. I'm sure it will. So it's a fascinating thing, and it rolls through my mind. And what I think would be a really cool thing, it'd have to scrape the right programming, right? I'm sure that I'm biased, but like, it'd have to scrape and learn from Linchpin to actually, because there's a lot of stupid stuff out there. So if it's scraped and learned from stupid mixed modality programming out there, then everybody would be overtrained and beat up, because there's some stuff out there that's just terrible, quite frankly. So it'd have to learn from the right stuff, or everyone would think that it's quote unquote, since it's AI, it's super smart, but it just pulled terrible data, and now it's giving you stuff that your knees, back, and shoulders are going to be hating you 5 years from now. So you're right. I think there's something there, and it's fascinating, and I think it's a very interesting topic. Jonathan B. With the CrossFit Open coming up soon, assuming you don't program the workouts into the regular programming, when and how do you suggest getting the workouts in? So when the Open comes around, I couldn't even tell, is it February? I think. But anyway, it's usually 3 weeks. Certainly voluntary. Do it if you want to do it. Don't do it if you don't want to do it. What I'm going to do to make it relatively easier for anybody who wants to do it is, on those 3 weeks, and it's one workout a week, that the Open is happening, if it's something that you want to do, the Open workout for that week will just be automatically programmed as the wildcard option. And so there'll be the regular Linchpin workout of the day, there'll be the scale, the limited equipment, the no equipment, but then the wildcard, and on any particular day that the Open is posted, will be the Open workout. So you can just tap on wildcard, and if that's what you want to do, then you'll be good to go. And as I've said this before, Open prep is ridiculous. It's a marketing campaign. It's trying to get you to buy something or think that somebody's doing something special. If some program has to do Open prep, they haven't been doing CrossFit. I don't know what to tell you, because the Open, if you choose to compete in it, again, it's voluntary, the Open is supposed to be the lowest barrier to entry, the largest participatory competition. It's supposed to be just actually CrossFit. And if it's not, that means HQ programs something weird and dumb, quite frankly. It's supposed to be CrossFit. And so if you're doing CrossFit day after day, week after week, you should be ready to do CrossFit. And if someone's saying you need to prepare for the Open, well, the Open's CrossFit, so you need to prepare to do CrossFit, what have you been doing? You probably haven't been doing CrossFit. You're doing some weird, I don't know what, and now we need to get ready for couplets and triplets and whatever it is. So anyway, I think Open prep is silly. So yeah, there'll be the wildcard option. Okay. Sarah J. Good morning, Coach. I've had undiagnosed chronic bilateral hip pain the last 4 years. Two-part question. Number one, did you notice your pain get worse during colder months? No, I did not. Number two, knowing you dealt with chronic pain for 23 years and still did CrossFit, what would be your best advice for somebody dealing with daily pain who still wants to get the workouts in and be fit? Man, that's a tough one, because first of all, it would probably be negligent of me to give medical advice here. So whatever disclaimer I have to say in 2024 on the internet of like, seek out your primary care physician. Don't listen to some random guy on the internet. But you ask me, my opinion, my personal advice in the situation. But everyone's so different. Like, I don't know what your pain is like compared to what my pain was like, where it limits you. Is it chronic, dull, and miserable? Is it profoundly acute during some things? All of those things matter. Is it muscular? Is it in the bone? Et cetera, et cetera. So that being said, I didn't have any special techniques, so to speak, to get in my workouts. I just got them in. I just chose to get them in and deal with whatever it was, longer warm-up, modifying when I had to, getting my ego the heck out of the way, realizing that something is better than nothing on some days where whatever I had going on just didn't lend itself well to the workout of the day. Maybe I couldn't squat on a particular day because what I had going on with my pelvis and my hip was just too much, but I could lunge. So I do, dumbbell lunges. On a lot of days like that, for whatever reason, for me personally, the dumbbell option seemed to be a lifesaver. If a barbell or something didn't work well with my hip, I could do the dumbbell option and it worked for me. And so I just had to find a way to get as close to the stimulus as I could and try to make a smart decision. But I know from your post that you've been dealing with this and undiagnosed for 4 years. That's crazy. And I know you've seen tons of people and they can't figure out what it is. So all I can say is I hope with all of my heart you run across some sort of healthcare provider that can give you some resolution, because that's just a frustrating way to live. Robert R. Being this is the start of a new year and lots of people will join Linchpin looking to better themselves, what is the percentage of people that will not continue and drop in the coming months from past years? I actually don't know what that percentage is, but you're absolutely right. There's going to be new year with every gym in the world. It's going to get an influx of people, and some will stay and some will go. That's January every year. What can be done, or what more can be done to further motivate them to stick around and keep going? Well, great question, Robert. Truth be told, you play a critical role in that. I mean, that's really it. I think the community is the secret weapon of Linchpin. And so it's people choosing to get involved, whether it's in the Linchpin squad in the BTWB app or in the private Facebook group. You get involved in there, you open up to everybody, you say hello, you start to interact with people, and then you start to make friends. I know that sounds so crazy on an online platform. I hear this all the time. Then it happens, everyone's like, you weren't lying, this is actually amazing, these people are super cool. Oh, when that happens, you develop these connections and you check in with people every day, and it helps keep you motivated. And then if you're having fun and the workouts do what they're supposed to do, and you're engaging with people that are supportive, kind, and friendly and help you along your journey, your chances of staying are a lot better. And so, quite frankly, all of you out there in Linchpin are the glue that keeps everybody around. Okay, let's see. Corey C. I do this quite often myself when short on time, but I wanted to see what you had to say. Let's take the 5x3 back squats recently programmed, for example. If my first set that I logged is 225 pounds and my last set was 315 pounds, by the way, nice triple. A triple 315, good for you. Did I do the workout how you intended in terms of intensity and volume? Like I said, if I'm limited on warm-up time, then I get started on the workout sets a bit early. But if my last set is 315, for example, should my sets really look like 300, 300, 300, 305, 315 instead of starting at 225 and ending at 315? So I get exactly what you're saying. And there's more than one way to do this workout. So if you've got, and this could apply to multiple strength days, but you've got 5 sets of 3. You've got a lot of ways to attack it. You could do what you did, which is you slowly build across those sets, going from lighter to heavier. Now, when I say lighter, in an ideal world, anything which is, so let's get our terminology set, right? You do your general warm-up, get your body warm, get loose, pass sort of full range of motion, elevate your breathing rate. You then, if it's a back squat, you're going to start building up your warm-up sets of that lift. You put a little weight on the bar, you do some reps, you do a little rest. Put a little more weight on the bar, do some sets, take a little rest, put a little more weight on the bar. You build up your warm-up sets until you get into the neighborhood where things are getting challenging, and then you're going to start the 5 sets of 3 are your working sets. So you have your warm-up sets and your working sets. Ideally, in an ideal world, whatever is that first number that you tick off as set number 1 of your working set, it's a challenging loading. It's something you certainly know that you're going to get. It's set number 1, but it's not just easy. If it's easy, it should be a warm-up set. If it's challenging, now you're starting to get into the territory of your working sets. And those 5 sets of 3 would all be working sets. And within that working set, you've got the the ability to go up in weight, to go down in weight, etc., to build, get a little heavy, go back down, or you can choose to keep the same load across all 5 sets of 3. Either one is the right way to do it. Now, getting back to now, if you want to say between those two, what is generally more challenging? Generally more challenging is holding a heavy darn weight across and trying to maintain that load for all 5 sets of 3. That's if you choose the right weight, each one is an appropriate grind and tough compared to slowly building. But again, neither one's right or wrong. It just depends on what you want to do. Now, in your question, the fact that you ended at 315 and you started at 225 leads me to believe that 225, for somebody as strong as you are, wouldn't really be considered a working set. That's a weight that, given how strong you are, would still be one of your warm-up weights. But, as we say all the time, there's the ideal situation, which I just described, and then there's the real situation, which is you live a real life with a busy schedule and limited time, and sometimes you're rushed, and sometimes you can't, as you said in your question, you didn't have a lot of time to warm up. Got to get in this squat session, and I can't do it exactly in an ideal world how I'd like to. So, you play the hand that you're dealt. And so in this situation that you described, you had to get moving, and so because of that, your first working set is most likely lighter than it would have been had you had ample time. And so, in the situation that you described, you're good to go. You played the hand that you're dealt, you started your squats, you built up, you made your way to 315, which is phenomenal, and then you got on with the rest of your day. So I think you're good to go. If you have more time, then you could probably have started at a heavier weight. Let's see. Joseph, MG, question for a question. Is there something that no one has asked you that you wish they had? Is there a question that you have for the community as a whole? This is such a good question, and I don't know the answer to it. I would have to put some good time and thought into it. A question that nobody has asked, but I wish that they had. I'm going to have to think about that. All right, Kevin B. Working out while sick in your home gym. How do you modify the movements for sinus issues or chest congestion? At what point is enough just enough and it's better to stop and simply rest? Okay, we're all friends here. I have a policy of not lying to you, and so I'm not going to lie to you. There's sometimes a difference between what I would recommend to other people and things that I do for myself. If you're sick, the obvious, prudent, smart thing is to tell people, slow the heck down. If the sickness is not that bad, really lower the intensity, lower the loading, don't run the clock, take it easy on yourself, give yourself a break, or if it seems like the right thing to do, skip it. Just skip it. Go for a walk if you want, or do nothing. Let your body rest. There's the professional healthy answer. What do? I basically have to be on death's doorstep not to get in a workout. And I will also say that probably is often not the best call to advance my fitness. But as I've said before, I don't just do the workouts for the strength and conditioning aspects related to like my muscle tissue and my cardiovascular capacity. I also work out every day because it's good for my mental health and it's good for what I have going on between the ears, and it makes me a better person and I'm more pleasant to be around. And so I need that. And even if I have a cough or a cold, I still need that mental side of it. And again, there is a point where it doesn't make sense for me to go into the gym, but it's a pretty dire circumstances for me personally. And I will just move, lower the weight, lower the intensity. And I'm not recommending that anybody else does that, but that's just me. Okay, now questions from the Linchpin crew on the BTWB app, the BTWB squads feature. All right, let me move this a little bit to the side here. Got multiple screens happening. From Susan A. Apologies if this is a silly question, but I'm dying to know if skipping instead of jogging would be effective for overall GPP, general physical preparedness, aka fitness. If I skipped my 400s, that doesn't mean skipped like avoided. It means skipped like you're skipping down the road. If I skipped my 400s in a workout, for example, would I be shortchanged? I understand if you choose not to answer this. It's a very stupid question, but Happy New Year. Now, Susan, when you first wrote this and I read it and you said skipping, I know that in, I'm in the US, but I know in parts outside of the world, when we say jumping rope, people call it skipping rope. And so what I thought you meant was if I'm skipping rope in place of 400s, am I being shortchanged? So I'll answer both questions, but then you posted a photo of somebody literally skipping. And so I know you're talking about skipping. Jumping rope, you can do that as a substitution for 400s, and it's not the same. It's better than nothing, but it's not the same. Running's running. Skipping, I suppose that you could, right? I mean, you're covering 400 meters no matter what. I tend to think you probably would not have the overall speed that you would be able to maintain in a regular run. But, if that's what gets you out the door for 400, then skip away. Let's see. But my recommendation would be if you can run, run. But if it's skip or nothing, then skip. Okay. This is from FXTT. I don't know if this has already been asked as a question, but how do I bulk up and build a physique with the Linchpin method, or do I add something to it to develop the skill while continuing Linchpin? And so you're talking about aesthetics. Generally speaking, if you're talking just like you want to look a certain way and not necessarily perform well, then a lot of aesthetics is going to be centered around just like pure old school hypertrophy training, which is like what I did for my entire life pre-Linchpin. And that's generally going to be 3 to 4 sets of a movement, 8 to 12 repetitions. A lot of it will be single joint kind of bodybuilding style things. And that would probably be if you wanted, I don't know, a little bit more of a peak on your biceps. You wanted maybe some striations, what's the right name? Like maybe between your chest, you're doing some dumbbell flies, things like that. You want your triceps to have a little bit more of a point in the old horseshoe there, and so you're going to do some skull crushers or some kickbacks or some things like that. It would be more that sort of stuff, and a lot of it, and so you could certainly add some of that in if that was what you are interested in. Obviously, nutrition is going to be very important as well. If you're not lean and looking good from a body fat percentage, then you're not going to see that little curve down there at the bottom of your tricep or whatever it happens to be. And then another part happens to be just genetics, and I don't think people take that into account. There's just, most people can get into the gym and hit those bodybuilding style movements and not really have an astonishing change in their physique, because they just don't have the genetics of Lou Ferrigno or something like that. And so I think the genetics part is often overlooked. But the other part is, if you're eating well, you're strict on how you eat, you're getting good sleep, and you're doing what we do, and you're not going to look like a bodybuilder, but you're going to look fantastic, and you'll be built from head to toe out of muscle because you're eating well, you're working out with intensity when it makes sense, we modulate our intensity, and you're doing these total body compound lifts that just pack on muscle and power, like squats and deadlifts and thrusters and box jumps and pulling and sprinting and rowing. I mean, my goodness, you're gonna be set. But yeah, that's a lot of the hypertrophy stuff that isn't necessarily going to advance your fitness too much, but just the aesthetics is like 8 to 12 reps bodybuilding style movements. Philip P. Pat, I've always struggled with my rotator cuffs when pressing overhead, pulling. When the weight gets heavy, the volume is high. Any tips on building strength in the rotator cuffs to support these movements? I've had people say good things about, like that crossover symmetry protocol. And so you might want to do a little research on that. And you could probably find those exercises online for free. And then if you have bands that you use for assisted pull-ups or whatnot, you could probably just do those exercises. You would be a light band. It wouldn't be like a super heavy band, but with a light band, you could find those exercises and maybe add them into your warm-up protocol and see if that helps move the needle for you. Okay, question from Joseph T. How do you feel about holiday-themed workouts? I know a few hero workouts tend to be annual events on a given date. Not sure if Linchpin does this, but what about other holiday celebrations, specifically New Year's Day? Back on January 2014. So basically, he built this massive workout with his buddy on January 1st. Requires some math, etc., etc. Let's see. Thoughts, he says, seems like I'm inviting bad ideas and overzealous lifting, etc., etc. So, I guess the short answer is I'm not a fan of holiday-themed workouts, generally speaking. I'm a fan of, when I lay out the programming, not caring about any of that stuff and programming on each day what's actually needed and what makes sense. And, and then a lot of those holiday-themed workouts, not all of them, but a lot of them are just, they're not good workouts. They're just, with regards to the volume, the loading, the rep range, they try to fit something in where it doesn't fit. And then people wind up doing just a ton of stuff, and then they don't work out right for the rest of the week because they're just beat up from doing some sort of a thing. So me personally, I'm not a fan, generally speaking, of them. However, some people enjoy doing something every now and then, and to each their own. If it keeps you fired up and you enjoy it, then there's some value there. Okay, let's see. Andrea M. Hey coach, approaching the 9th year of CrossFit. Currently a level 2, teaching classes in Italy. Awesome. Studying for my L3, big fan of Linchpin. 3 years under the belt now, and I continue to be excited every week. So, I've got poor mobility overhead. Single arm is mostly good. Press with narrow grip movements is okay, but an overhead squat is not. I'm working to improve it, of course, but a big load is basically it's a no-go. So my question is an overhead lunge with a barbell, dumbbell, or kettlebell a good substitute for an overhead squat, even if I can't move so much load as a proper overhead squat? And if yes, lunges in place, forwards or backwards, walking lunges. Thanks for all the work. So this is very interesting. The thing that jumped out at me is a lot of times when people have a struggle overhead, widening of the grip feels better or gives them a better position. But this person actually has the opposite going on. Andrea has the opposite going on. It says that pressing overhead with a narrow grip is okay. And it sounds like when the grip gets wide to an overhead squat, it's not okay. That's very interesting and I think a little atypical. But to answer your question, yes, if you if you do an overhead lunge with a barbell locked out overhead, dumbbells or kettlebells locked out overhead, you're good to go. If overhead squatting doesn't treat you well and doesn't feel good, it feels painful in your shoulders, hey, you're looking to correct it, that's great, but don't do it. And what you just said there is fine. And you could do that with the barbell locked out, dumbbells or kettlebells. You could do that if you had the distance, lunging for 25 feet or, 25 or 15 meters or whatever it happened to be. Or you could do lunges in place, forward or backwards. And while they're not exactly the same as an overhead squat, you're absolutely close enough. This is the interesting thing about, how to phrase this, just because nobody was overhead squatting other than Olympic lifters, before CrossFit kind of put it on the map, right? And then some people, and I'm not saying that, Andrea, this is you, but I've seen this theme. Some people think just because CrossFit started doing something that it's this magical movement and I can't change it or modify it because I'm losing the secret sauce. That's not the case in any way, shape, or form. What's more important than that one particular movement is the gross movement pattern that it's trying to replicate. And can you find a way to replicate that works for you? And in this case, not overhead squatting, but you're locking out weight overhead and you're lunging with it, you're passing below parallel or really close to it in your lunge. You've got tremendous midline stabilization going on. It's a challenging movement and you're locking out weight overhead. You're golden. You're absolutely golden, and I would just do it without a moment's hesitation. Josh B. Is there an absolute minimum and maximum time for rest and interval workouts when the rest is programmed, such as 1-to-1 or 1-to-2? Seems like that would usually fall in the 3 to 5 minute range. Would you suggest we keep that range, etc., etc.? So generally speaking, is there a minimum and a maximum? So I would say those are, generally speaking, the minimums and maximums. So let's say that a workout, an interval took 2 minutes, okay? And then it was, you're going to do 4 intervals. And then it says the rest should be a 1-to-1, anywhere from a 1-to-1 to a 1-to-2 work to rest ratio. That just gives people a range, right? So a 1-to-1 work to rest ratio, for anyone who's unfamiliar with it, you would rest 1-to-1, the same amount of time that the work took you. The work took you 2 minutes, so you would rest 2 minutes, then you'd hit your next interval. And if you were a little more tired, you slowed down in your next interval, and it took you 2 minutes and 30 seconds, and you want to do a 1-to-1 work to rest ratio, then since the work took you 2:30, you would rest 2:30. Getting back to our original example, where the first interval took 2 minutes, a 1-to-2 work to rest ratio would be you would rest twice as long as the work took you. So if the work took you 2 minutes, you're going to rest 4 minutes. So in this example, it's saying rest anywhere from on the low side 2 minutes to on the high side 4 minutes. And a lot of times that is just to allow the athlete to not take more or less rest than they need. And a lot of CrossFitters are more guilty of wanting to violate the shorter side. You get so used to doing 3, 4, 5 round workouts that now when you do an interval style training, a lot of CrossFitters want to go back and hit that next interval sooner than they should. Where resting, and maybe they think that, no, I'm not saying that you do this, Josh, but think that they get less rest, they're going to make it a quote unquote harder workout, which means it's a better workout. None of those things are true. And so we want to make sure that, God bless them, these CrossFitters actually take enough rest. So on an interval day, we can go and hit that next interval hard, because we're going to have plenty of days that don't have rest in there. And then, it would be a rare individual that would need to go more than a 1-to-2 work to rest ratio. So you could go, it doesn't mean you have to do either a 2-minute rest or a 4-minute rest. It's anywhere from a low of 2 to a high of 4. So anywhere from a 1-to-1 to a 1-to-2 is kind of the general consensus there. And if you're looking for more information on that, if I can remember it off the top of my head, I think it's Linchpin Conversations number 140 is an entire episode of podcast that we did on choosing rest periods on interval-based training. So go ahead and check that out, episode 140. Okay, let's see. Rachel Y. How have you managed the limitations post-surgery? Of note, I had foot surgery the same day as you. I was back on my feet for 2 days and then fell, severely spraining my other foot and ankle. Ouch, that's awful. I'm sorry that happened. I'm looking at 3 to 6 month recovery. Thankfully, no more surgery. The mental loss of even walking is tough. How have you handled the slow rehab post-surgery? Man, I feel you, Rachel, 100%. I'm sorry to do that. How did I handle the slow rehab post-surgery? I don't want to say that I just did it, but I think I understand the concept finally, at this stage in my life, of delayed gratification, of the long-term game, of if I rushed my rehab, and my rehab was so boring and so repetitive, it was awful, but I knew that it was beneficial, it was good, I was doing functional movements, doing them at low intensity, but super repetitive and boring, and that this would allow me to get back to the quality of life and capacity that I want to. And if I didn't do that, and I rushed it, I could do one of two things. I could do my rehab appropriately, painfully mind-numbing as it was, and then get back to as close to 100% as humanly possible, or I could cave in, let my ego get in there, be impatient, get frustrated, and start either blowing off my rehab or doing too much too soon, probably tweak myself, and then instead of getting as close to 100% for the rest of my life, I would probably be like 80% to 75% forever and ever. Didn't want to play that game. Finally, at the stage in my life where I had the discipline to understand that, to understand delayed gratification, and to understand the process, and that the frustrations at this point were worth it in the long run. And so I would keep your eye on the long-term prize, and then find out what can you do. If you're injured your foot, I'll tell you what, and you're going to be maybe staying off it for 3 to 6 months, I want to check back in with you and you tell me how your strict pull-ups 3 to 6 months from now. I want you to be a beast at strict pull-ups. How are your strict ring dips? Dumbbell bench press. I mean, there's so many things if you figure out what you can do. Seated Arnold press. I mean, so many things that you can do. You figure it out. Let me know how that goes. So focus on what you can do. Scott P. Have you ever been totally sideswiped by a workout? Sure. Like your performance was inexplicably bad? Sure. If yes, how did you deal with it? Well, the short answer is, after all these years, I'm kind of good where I have a bit of a goldfish memory. And meaning if I go into the gym and it just doesn't go how I want to go, I don't know, I'm going to do a 5x5 back squat. I know what my last 5x5 back squat was, and I missed the mark. And I miss it by a lot. There's probably something I can point to as to why. Something going on with my life. My kids are sick. I'm sick. I rushed the warm-up. What were the last 3 workouts before the previous 5x5? Maybe that 5x5 was like right after a rest day. Felt fresh and good. And this 5x5 was like day 3, and we went below parallel 2 days ago. I'm still a little tender from that. So this is a 5x5 under fatigue and stress on a bit of a tired body, which has training value, but that's a different stimulus. And just realizing that it's a training day, not a testing day, and what makes sense and has value is on any particular day, I do a 5x5 squat at whatever feels appropriately challenging, and the load on the bar is the load on the bar. It's taken me a while to get to that mindset, but man, is it freeing, and it's wonderful, and it actually leads to like more PRs because I'm not stressing out and comparing myself. But so, okay, Scott, I see that you did Grace a couple weeks ago at 115 pounds and you set a PR at 115 in 5 minutes and 12 seconds. Congratulations. Then Heavy Grace came up, so you decided to go RX for the first time, and it took you 27 minutes. So you did 30 reps of clean and jerk at 115 in 5 minutes and 12 seconds. Then you did 30 at 135 and finished in 27 minutes. Some of that time you say was taken up swearing. No idea what happened. After the frustration, I settled and realized that 20 extra pounds is not a small percentage increase, and I had no real plan going on. And I tried again. I'll be better prepared and should be faster. So yes. So a couple things here. And again, I've got a policy of not lying to anybody, right? So I'll shoot you straight on what is awesome and what has me like putting an eyebrow up that's like, that's interesting. So the first thing is the positive. The positives, you say, when Heavy Grace came up, you decided to do 135 for the first time. So you had never done 30 clean and jerks at 135 pounds in your entire time on planet Earth. And then you did it. And it took you 27 minutes, but you did something you had never done before in your entire life. That's amazing. That's awesome. And I think for that day we also wrote for time or not, because I knew a lot of people would push themselves with the loading that they chose, and they could just make it a heavy day at a high heart rate, take all the rest that they need, and get in that volume at that loading, which is phenomenal. That's the awesome part. The part which makes me raise my eyebrow is, had you told me that 30 reps at 115 took you 512, and you said, okay, I'm going to go to 135, and you had me guess what I thought the time would be, I wouldn't have guessed 27 minutes. I've got a lot of data going through my head when I say that, thousands of people I'm comparing it to. So that seems peculiar to me, like there's something else going on there. And I don't know, again, if it was how you slept or other things going on in your day or whatever it happened to be, but I wouldn't have guessed that. And you said you didn't have a plan going in and all this. I'm not quite sure what happened there. Would have to have a chat about what was going on with your life and your body that particular time, but I wouldn't have guessed that. And I do have a feeling that if you tackle this workout again in a month or two or whenever it comes up, and you go in with a plan, maybe you establish you're going to do one every, 30 seconds on the clock, and that will put you at 15 minutes. Or you're going to do singles and how they feel good. Whatever it happens to be, I do have a feeling that you're going to knock down that time, because those 2 times don't add up. So there's something else interesting going on there. But how would I respond afterwards? I would just take it as the positive side, as yeah, the time didn't say what you wanted it to, but you had never lifted that much load in your entire life for that many reps. That's amazing. So, and everybody's a little bit different. For some people, that percentage increase would add double or triple their time, okay? For other people, that percentage increase is a huge increase, and it affects them in a great way. And so people are different with regards to moving percentages of their one rep max and things like that. And you just might be that person that you can move a high percentage of your 1 rep max pretty darn well, with that 115 pounds and 512. Then you bumped it up a little bit more, and it was a significant impact with the challenge level. Again, no two people are kind of the same with that. Okay, final few questions here. I know it varies by individual, but what is the bare minimum someone should be doing in terms of mobility work? I would say the stretching protocols that we put in at the end of each day for Linchpin there. Those are just the basics you need to keep happy and healthy. They're nothing flashy, but they are time tested and they work really well. And then if you wanted to build off of that, man, you just go to YouTube and get lost in as many free mobility things as you want there. Scott F. I appreciate your book recommendations, especially Principles, Boys in the Boat, Basic Economics. Any more recommendations? I'm reading The Comfort Crisis right now. I just started it. Everyone says it's really good, but I haven't read enough of it to give it a thumbs up or whatnot yet. And then Empire of the Summer Moon, I think, is a fantastic book that I couldn't put down. Corey W. What's the most valuable? This is the final question. Corey W. What's the most valuable lesson you learned from your time as a SEAL? Man, the most valuable one. There's a bunch. I can't rank order them, but I'll give you one. So I think, well, without going into a long story or whatnot, I think the most valuable lesson that I learned, obviously grit, determination, don't quit. Nobody cares. You're cold. Nobody cares. Do it. Do what you have to do. Do what is required. Do your job. Nobody cares that you didn't sleep. Nobody cares that you're hungry. Nobody cares that you've got a blister on your foot. Nobody cares. You do what is required. Period. End of story. And you do what is required, and you don't stop doing what's required until it is finished. And then once it's finished, even once it's finished, then you don't tend to your own needs. You don't tend to your hunger. You don't tend to your foot. What you do is you then, once you finish what you had to do, you ask the guy next to you, do you need help? And if they say yes, then you blow off all of your personal needs and you help your buddy until the work that both you and he had is finished. And then once that work's finished, you ask the next guy in your boat crew, in your squad, in your platoon, whatever it happens to be, do you need help? And you keep playing this game until everyone says, no, we're good. Then you take care of yourself. Then you take care of your hunger. Then you take a warm shower because you've been freezing all night. But you don't do any of those things until the work that you were supposed to do is done, and then you make sure that every other human being that you're associated with is also good. That's probably the one of the good ones. So anyway, and yeah, I don't know. I almost hopped on a soapbox there. I think my personal, Pat Sherwood's personal opinion of the world these days is too many people are focusing on themselves and putting themselves on a pedestal. Do what you've got to do, not what you want to do. There's the difference. Do what is required. Do what is necessary. And then help your buddies. Then you can take care of yourself. Okay. Have a great day. It's a rest day. I encourage you to take it. And we'll talk later.